Our next presenter is Madeline Girolamo. Madeline will share research on the relationship between music and cognition. Her mentor is Dr. Christina Mazakis. Madeline?
Thank you. Hello, my name is Madeline Girolamo. I'm in my final year of undergraduate research and studies for forensic psychology. I will be presenting an experiment on the relationship between music and cognition that I've conducted for my research methods and statistics course. So music is everywhere, in the grocery store, elevators, lobbies of banks and doctors' offices. Young people today often wear headphones throughout their entire day, even while in school and hanging out with friends. What effect does that have on people? Does music influence their mood, how fast they think, how clearly they think? I'm here today to tell you about my research on music, specifically about the impact that it has on cognition, or the way that people think. This research is important because it will help us to understand how music affects us in different ways as we are conducting different tasks throughout our daily lives. Does music help students study and concentrate, or does it hinder them? Does music aid or inhibit productivity? That is the question that this study aims to answer, is whether people are more or less successful in completing cognitive tasks with or without music. So there is much importance in conducting this research on these topics. As I mentioned, music is everywhere and in increasingly more public spaces today. How music impacts us cognitively is important to understand how we think and behave in different environments when music is present. Does it change the way that we think or make decisions when we're grocery shopping and there's music playing? Does it hinder our ability to concentrate and remember things as we study or complete homework? In my experiment, I chose to focus on how music affects cognition, but more specifically the way that we think while we are at work, school, or completing homework and work. As I said, this is growing more relevant with each day as students continue to wear earbuds for 8 hours a day at school. I wanted to get to the bottom of this and see whether it was more beneficial or harmful when we go about our day completing these tasks and music is constantly present. First, it is important to take a look at the literature and what other researchers have found regarding these topics. I began by looking into music and its impact on emotions. Several studies have found that music does influence emotions, and not only that, but different genres can have different types of impacts. For example, it was found that classical and jazz music elicit calm feelings, and listeners experience a decrease in worry. They also found that heavy metal music tended to induce feelings of anxiety, and listeners reported a decrease in feelings of comfort, security, and relaxation. Interestingly, these effects can differ based on the age of the listener as well. One study found that adolescents who listened to classical music experienced an increase in fatigue and sadness, while the same classical music reduced those same feelings of fatigue and sadness in older adult listeners. Another study looked at the impact of lyrics and how aggressive lyrics within music can induce feelings of aggression within the listener. And so moving more on to the relationship between music and cognition, prior research has looked at the variable of the volume of music and how that has an impact as well. It was found that those who completed a task in silence did better than those who completed a task in either low volume or high volume music. In addition to that, those who completed the task in the low volume still did better than those who listened to music at a higher volume. Several studies have also established a connection between emotion and cognition, and that's why it's important to look at both when we're studying the impact on cognition and music. Performance on cognitive tasks seem to improve with certain types of music, but that may be because the music improves the listener's mood and emotion, therefore allowing them to better cognitively perform. Because of this, researchers coined what is known as the Mozart effect, which is a phenomenon where participants who listened to Mozart prior to a given task were reported to have better spatial and cognitive abilities compared to those who completed the task in just silence. It was found to be true not just of Mozart's music, but of many other types of music as well. The enhanced cognitive performance was found to be attributed to participants who listened to music that they enjoyed, that was age-appropriate, that was upbeat, and familiar to them. The music induces a positive affect and heightened arousal, which in turn leads to increased performance in a variety of non-music related tasks. This led researchers to the conclusion that listening to liked music yields better results on cognitive tasks when compared to listening to disliked or even unfamiliar music. So I had two hypotheses going into this experiment. The first was that participants will be more successful on a cognitive task when there is no music playing compared to when there is music playing. The second was that participants who are familiar with the song that is played will have better performance than those who are unfamiliar with the song that is being played. And for the purposes of this study, I define success as the quantity of questions answered on the task, as well as the accuracy of the questions that were completed. These hypotheses were based on the information and prior research conducted on similar topics within this field of study, as I have just previously finished discussing. So now to take a look at the methods and how the experiment was actually conducted. First, each participant was given a consent form and the instructions for what they needed to do to complete the task. Once they were informed of the process, they began the cognitive task. The task in this case was an arithmetic worksheet, and you can see a few examples up on the board behind me of what those problems looked like. They each consisted of a 3-digit number multiplied by a single-digit number. There were 5 pages on this worksheet, and each participant had the same worksheet with the same math problems. They were instructed to fill out as many questions on the worksheet as possible, and if they needed to skip a question, that would be all right. It was just noted to them that any skipped questions would be counted as incorrect, and they were instructed not to go back and fill out a previously skipped question. So the participants had 8 minutes total to complete as many questions as they could, 4 minutes with music and 4 minutes without. The conditions were randomly assigned with a generator as to which one they would do first, with music or without music, in order to counterbalance the results. This was done to eliminate any effect that may exist from them completing the music first or the no music first. So it was about half and half, which each participant conducted first. After the cognitive task, the math worksheet, was completed, the participants were asked to fill out a 9-question questionnaire survey that I had written regarding their demographics and some of their music preferences. So questions were things like age, gender, and education history, as well as have you ever heard the song that was played during the study before? Do you typically listen to music when completing work or homework, things like that. The materials used were, of course, the math worksheet and the random generator, as I have previously mentioned. There was also, of course, the music that was played, and the specific song that I used will be discussed a bit later, and as to why I chose the song that I did. And the participants also all wore headphones throughout the duration of the study in order to prevent any outside noises from impacting their concentration. And for that reason, I asked that the headphones remain on for the no music portion of the experiment as well, again, to prevent any outside noises or distractions. And then finally, the questionnaire was used, as I have already discussed. So now to take a look at the participants that were involved in this study. There were 31 in total, and they were comprised of different QU students, staff, and faculty. 13 were male and 18 were female. The ages ranged from 18 to 59 with an average age of 28. And as you can see on the chart, their education levels were varied, ranging from a high school diploma to the completion of a master's degree. Approximately 74% of the participants were current students, and it is also important to note that 26 out of the 31 participants, or almost 84%, were familiar with the song that was played during this experiment. So moving on to a portion of my results, here is some of the correlations that were run. It is not the complete list, but the most relevant correlations that were completed. So a correlation essentially tells us which factors or variables in the study have a statistically significant relationship. And for those that do, it tells us the degree of the relationship, so how strong it is, and the direction, so whether it's a positive or a negative correlation. For this specific chart, the numbers with the stars next to them are the ones that are statistically significant. So we can take a look at the bottom row, and we can see that familiarity, which is how familiar the participants were with the song that was played. There are no stars, and the numbers are all very low, which indicate there is not a statistically significant relationship between how familiar the participant was with the song and their performance, so the quantity or accuracy of the questions that they completed. So for my second hypothesis, that participants would do better if they were familiar, that was not supported within this data. And then there are a few other interesting things to take note of in regards to these correlations, though. There is a strong positive correlation between the quantity of questions answered in both the music and the no music condition. So what this means is the more questions that a participant answered with music, the more that they likely answered without the music. And the same can be said of the accuracy. The more that they got accurate and complete in the music condition, the more that they likely got accurate in the no music condition. And finally, there was a moderate positive correlation between the quantity and the accuracy of the questions completed. So again, the more questions they completed, the more that they tended to get correct. So these results do not yield anything that supports or does not support my hypotheses. They just tell us generally that participants that had completed more questions had a better accuracy, and the larger amount they did in one condition, the larger they did in the other. So additionally, I conducted a t-test with the data that I had collected to evaluate my first hypothesis that participants would be more successful without the music compared to with the music. I found that there was no statistical significance in the relationship between the quantity of questions answered or the accuracy of questions completed in either condition, meaning that essentially there was no difference between the quantity or the accuracy of the questions compared to music and no music, showing no significant effect of music on the completion of the task. These results are not consistent with the literature and prior research on this topic, and so for a variety of reasons, my numbers did not compare to prior research. So that leads me into my limitations that I had within this study and some of the possible reasons why my results differed from that of the literature. To start, I had a relatively small sample size, and that made it difficult for an effect to be apparent within the data. This is due to the fact that it had limited accessibility and the participants were made up of a convenience sample, again, of people found within the QU community. As a result of that, my research is not truly representative of the larger population as a whole, and so therefore it cannot be totally generalizable. And then finally, a final limitation is that due to my limited time and resources, the scope of the study was limited to just 2 conditions of music or no music. One song was used, and there were no further conditions beyond music or not. Ideally, several genres of music would have been looked at, and the potential effects that that may have had on different genres, as well as other variables such as the age of the listener, the volume of the music, things like that. And as one of the limitations in this study was that I was not able to use different genres and I had to choose one single song, I will now talk about why I selected the song that I did. So I chose the song Come On Eileen by Dexy's Midnight Runners. The album cover is displayed here, some of you may know it. But I chose this song because I wanted to follow along with what was learned in my research, that music yielded better results when it was familiar, upbeat, and age-appropriate. So as many of you may know, Come On Eileen is a very upbeat song. It has a relatively fast tempo, and the lyrics are generally positive. I did not want to choose a song that had negative or aggressive lyrics, as again, as we saw in the research, that can worsen the results. So I thought that many people across several age groups would be familiar with this song, and it's possibly just my opinion, but I saw it as an uncontroversial classic that many people would be familiar with. So generally, I just wanted to find a song that I believed would elicit a positive response and positive emotions in order to yield the best results for my participants. So my suggestion for future researchers is to, of course, try to obtain more participants if possible. The more participants that are included, the more likely it is that an effect would show within the results. And along that same vein, if possible, having as diverse and representative of a sample size as possible would be ideal. And then as mentioned within my limitations, I would suggest that future research explore the different variables like the genre of music, the age of the listener, volume of music, and even different types of cognitive tasks. So I specifically chose a mathematical worksheet But it would be very interesting to see the impacts of music on different types of cognitive tasks like writing, verbal, decision-making tasks as well. And of course, as I discussed, emotion and cognition are very tightly intertwined. So research regarding music's impact on emotion is also going to be extremely relevant and helping our knowledge and understanding of how it impacts cognition as well. So that is all I have for you. Here are my references, and then if there are any questions.
Great job, Madeline. So I actually was able to take your test, and I love math, so that was really fun for me. But I'm curious, I believe I started out with the music, and then when it was time to switch, like it was still running through my head. So I was kind of still in that rhythm until the very end. And I'm wondering, would you get different results if we would have done it on a different day, like music on one day or a length of time in between?
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility, having a gap in time between those. And again, that was probably due to one of my limitations, again, as time and resources. I didn't have the resources to be able to bring participants in more than once. But again, to try and counterbalance those effects, you had to do the music first, whereas half of the other participants did no music first, to try to balance out those effects that could have been different due to that.
Great job, Maddie. I do not know that song, and I was trying to get you to play it for us, and you didn't. So I had a question. So can you go back to your t-test
Yes.
results? So my question is, you calculated a Cohen's d effect size, and you didn't talk about that. So in terms of your t results, the p-value or the significance and the statistic of the t result, what can you tell us? Does Cohen's d sort of go along with those results, or does it imply something else is happening?
Yeah, so for the Cohen's d effect size that I got in both of the t-tests that were run, it was a relatively small effect size, so that indicates to me that even if I did have more participants, an effect would not be apparent within the study that I completed. And again, that's not consistent with prior research and literature. So a few things would have to be tweaked and reevaluated in order to see what we could do to get that effect size to go up.
Do we have any other questions?
Have you considered that you might possibly be right and the others are incorrect?
That is a possibility. I would love to believe that I was correct and everybody else was wrong. But yeah, just due to the sheer amount of research that has indicated that there is an effect, I believe that there is. And it's strange because my hypothesis was that people would do better without music, but I am one of those people that listens to music 24/7, completing work, homework, sometimes even in class. Doesn't mean I'm not listening. I just personally think it helps me concentrate. However, a lot of the research has shown that people concentrate better without.
So I have a quick question because I like to study with music. And I use with my students that I tell them it's great to study with music. However, I think music with words competes for some of the same real estate in your brain. And even though you might, also the verbal aspects of it. So I always encourage students to use classical music without lyrics. And I wonder if lyrics themselves, like I think you indicated that a little bit, might have a role in.
Yeah, so that's something I also thought about, and I pored over a lot when I was trying to select which song I would use and what genre I would use, since I would only be able to use one. But especially when I looked up the study about aggressive lyrics inducing aggression in participants, that's something I definitely thought about. Yes, yeah. So I just didn't want to use classical as it's been done so often. It's one of the most studied forms of music, in my opinion. So I wanted to do something a bit different. I don't even know what genre my song would be. It was very popular in the 80s. So, but yeah, I do think that I do think that the lyrics could have a potential effect.
Well, I'd like to say, so sort of going off that comment,
So when we're angry, we're more motivated to do something. So that might have been interesting to see if they would have done that math better or more of it if they were angry. But thank you. Great responses and great.
Well, right, and that's again why I kind of looked at familiarity. Again, the more familiar you are with a song, the less you would, I guess, pause to process the words that they're saying. So I think that was kind of how I included that without using a non-lyrical song. I kind of looked at how familiar they were with it.
Kind of to tie in with like emotion, I kind of honestly wonder, it's like, because you know the different emotions can depend on like the different music you're listening to. I kind of wonder how much that changes for people that actually play that kind of music, you know, musicians basically, and how that affects them. Is it a little bit different, or is it about the same for those kind of people?
Yeah, I don't know too much about that. My study, again, focused more on listening to music rather than performing. But I did come across that quite a bit in my research on how being able to play music impacts your cognition. And again, I don't know too much about that, but I do think that it would have some different effects as well.
Thank you, Madeline.
Thank you.